Hello chess fans, today we're going to be continuing our series on the Nimzo-Indian defense, and the variation that we will discuss today is the classical variation of the Nimzo-Indian. So without wasting any time, let's get into it. After d4, knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, bishop to b4. Here white plays this move, queen c2. This is the beginning of the classical variation. So what is the idea of queen c2? Queen c2 has two ideas. One of them is that after a3 and then bishop captures on c3, white wants to recapture the bishop with the queen. So white does not want to recapture with the pawn and damage the structure. The second idea of queen c2 is that the queen on c2 supports the pawn on e4. Well, supports the e4 square and the pawn advancement to e4 in some lines. So let's discuss what lines exist in this position. So castles is the main move, and there's also d5, which is the Noah variation. There's c5, the Berlin variation. Knight to c6 is called the Zurich variation. We will discuss all of these lines today, and I will give my recommendations as well. So let's start by the main line, which is castles. Now, after castles, there are two main ways white can play. White can either play a3 or white can play for e4. White can also play knight to f3. However, that transposes to a lot of queen's gambit declined positions, and the unique positions of Nimzo-Indian defense are not really there anymore. And if you study Queen's Gambit, you will be able to figure out all the nuances there. However, I don't want to get into this knight f3 move today. I want to mainly discuss positions that are unique to Nimzo-Indian. And one of the moves, one of the variations is a3. Bishop takes c3, queen takes c3. This is the idea. We put the bishop on b4 to take on c3. And here we play this move b6. This is called the Keres defense of the classical variation. So what is the idea? Well, we're just developing the bishop to b7, sometimes on a6, but mostly it's going to be b7. In this position, white plays bishop g5, normal developing move. We play h6, always a good inclusion. Bishop to h4, bishop b7. And here, in most of your games, you're going to see e3. This is the most played move in the Lichess database, and play continues normally after that. After e3, you go d5, you go c5, you play all of these moves and ideas that you are already familiar with. So this is not something I'm going to discuss in depth right now. The most played move by masters, however, is pawn to f3, and the idea is to play e4, and this pawn on f3 supports that. So in this position, we need to meet f3 there's two ways to meet f3. You can play d5 and stop e4 directly, and there's also c5, which allows this structure d5 e4. However, in this case, I don't think it's the best continuation, and frankly, masters don't play this as well. d5 has 308 games, but c5 has only 30, so this is not really a good version of that structure. There are better versions of it that you can get out of different move orders. So here, d5 is the move chosen by masters, and here again there are two ways to play. There's e3, which I think is the more played line. However, I think it's not as good, just simply because that gives us the opportunity to take on d5 with the knight here. So after e3, knight d7, cd5, we can take with the knight in this position. And the difference is that after this sequence, bishop h4 is the main move, retreating. If bishop c7 is played here, knight to d5, bishop d6, knight e3 threatening a fork, king f2, knight c2, rook c1 or d1, let's just say rook c1, rook f to c8, defending the knight. We're doing totally okay in this position, and black is even better, so maybe white should play rook to d1 instead. So this is the line after e3. However, if white takes c takes d5 immediately, now we cannot really take with the knight, because the pawn on e3 is no longer hanging. So let's say we go into the same sequence here, something like this happens. For example, this pawn is not hanging anymore, so there's no point here. There's no knight e3 that takes a pawn. So this sequence just simply does not work anymore. So after d5, cd5, we have to take back with the e pawn. And here white plays e3, and we meet e3 by playing rook e8, natural developing move. And here there's already multiple ways to continue playing for white. So bishop b5 is one of the main ones, but your idea in general is that you want to pressure the e-file, you want to play queen e7, and you want to play c5 at some point, knight d7, c5. If white allows you to play something like, let me just show you, if white plays a move like knight to e2, you can even play knight c6 with the idea of knight a5 and knight c4. This further pressures the e3 pawn and gives you a great position. No, okay, it's not better, but you know, it's a good position for black. So instead of that, white should play bishop to b5, and here play continues. Normally we play c6, and then we play knight to d7. We can also start with queen e7, or we can play queen e7 here. Bishop to f2, further defending the pawn. Bishop a6, again attacking this knight, so white cannot castle. Queen d2, white prepares the castle, and here we play c5, and we get into this position. I think this position is very nice for the black pieces. It's more active, and it is putting a lot of pressure. Generally, I don't like to have the hanging pawn structure, because as you know, let's say a dc5, for example, this is called the hanging pawn structure, because white doesn't have the c and d pawns, and black doesn't have e and b pawns. And I'm not a huge fan of this structure. However, in this specific position, because of white's awkward configuration of pieces with f3, bishop being on f2, this is a bit awkward for white, and I actually really like this. These two pawns are very active. You're going to be able to push them through eventually and be able to win the game. d4 already has major threats down the e-file, so this is something that you should consider as the black pieces. Okay, so that is the Keres variation of the classical variation. Let me go back here to this position. So here we discussed a3 in this position. However, instead of a3, I just refreshed the page. After a3, what white can do is play e4 instead of a3. So what white can do is play e4 and basically say that I don't care that you can take my knight on c3. I can always take back with the pawn. I care about the center more. And here you should not really take the knight, by the way. You should almost never take the knight unless you are provoked. So we don't take on c3. Instead, since we allowed white to play e4, my voice just cracked, sorry about that. Since we allowed white to play e4, we need to immediately fight back against this. So we need to play d5. There are other moves as well, such as d6, for example, but those are a bit passive. If you are interested in these lines, white generally ends up with a slightly better position in most of them. D5 is the best way to fight for equality, in my opinion. So after d5, white plays e5, knight e4, jumping in the center, bishop d3 developing, c5 striking in the center, knight f3 developing, cd4, knight d4, and knight d7, attacking the pawn on e5, maybe knight c5 ideas potentially as well. Bishop f4 and queen h4 is a very interesting move in this position, g3, queen h5. And this position right here, there are still hundreds of games here. There's like 400 games just in castles. and this is a super theoretical position. Grandmasters have played this position lots, and generally I would not recommend going into this. You can go into this if you study a lot and you want to play the sharpest lines. However, I don't think it's very practical, and what I would say is that going all the way back here, I would not suggest you to play the move castles, because castles runs into all of these lines that you have to know. You have to know a3, you have to know e4, you also have to know knight f3 and transpositions there. So instead of that, you can play some other lines, and I'm going to show you alternatives right now. So the first one that I'm going to show you is called the Zurich variation of the Nimzo-Indian defense. That is knight to c6 on move 4. Now, the idea of knight c6 is that you're trying to take advantage of white's queen c2 move immediately, because the queen no longer guards the d-pawn. So here, white has to defend the d-pawn. The best way to do it is knight f3. You can play e3 as well, but why play e3 when you can also develop a knight? So knight to f3 is the most played move, and here we play d6. We play d6 with the idea of playing queen e7 and e5. And in an ideal situation, this is what we want to achieve. So let me show you a line here. Let's say white plays a3, natural move, takes, queen takes. We go a5, controlling b4. We go h6, always a good inclusion. We go queen e7, e3, e5. And here d5 is what we want to see from the white pieces. Once d5 is pushed by white, this weakens the square on c5, and after knight to b8, we can reroute this knight to d7 and then to c5, taking advantage of this square. Let me make one more move. Let's say bishop e2 is played. Here you can even consider the move a4. This is not the best move, but I just want to highlight the idea of a4, and the idea is that if you push a4, there's no longer going to be b4 ever, because as soon as b3 or b4 is played, you will take on b3, or if b4, you can always en passant. So this square on c5 will forever remain an outpost for your knight. It's a very strong square. That is the ideal situation that you want to achieve. However, going back, there is a way to play here with the white pieces that gives him a slight advantage, and that's the move bishop to d2 instead of a3. And the idea is that after castles, a3, white wants to recapture with the bishop instead of the queen. And this is a slightly better version of the same position. We play a rook e8. We play a5, so same idea. We want to further control b4. And then we play e5, striking in the center. If white plays d5 in this position, you can always play that same idea of rerouting over to c5. So that's always very strong. If not, if white castles, then you can continue playing the game by just simply capturing. Knight captures, and you have a position where I would say white is slightly better because white has the two bishops, but the position's playable. It's definitely playable for both sides, but it's not anything special. So if white knows this idea of bishop d2 and then bishop takes c3, then white at best is going to get a slightly better position, just a very tiny bit better than the normal positions. The normal positions where white develops to g5, these are actually not as strong due to the line that I showed you earlier. So that is the Zurich variation, as you can see. This is a lot of fun, so I would recommend this line. It's pretty cool. So if you're interested, you can play this. However, there are two more variations that I want to discuss. Let me open a new chapter here. After bishop b4, queen c2, there's this move pawn to c5. This is called the Berlin variation of the Nimzo-Indian. So what is going on here? First and foremost, for white to actually play this position correctly, white needs to take on c5. The reason why taking on c5 is the best move is because this bishop has already moved to b4, and after c5, if you capture with the bishop, you're wasting a lot of time, right? And if you capture the knight on c3 at any point, then you're risking losing this pawn. Like for example, let's say after d takes c5, black castles, this is the main move. Let's say a3, instead of taking on c5, which is the main move, let's say, you know, white takes on c3. Now the queen can take, and it is very difficult to win it. Actually, it's impossible to win this pawn back. So what are you going to do? You play queen c7, boom, b4. So now white gets to keep this pawn, and white is much better here, I would say. So I would not go into this position. And white's not much better just because he's up a pawn. He's much better because this dark square bishop, which black traded off, in this case is going to be a monster because it's going to go to b2, and the diagonal is going to be pressured forever here. With the queen being on c3, bishop being on b2, this is a very dangerous position. So it's not just a pawn, it's also the fact that the position is very good for the white pieces. So that is why you have to take on c5, and this doesn't make sense in itself because you played bishop b4 and now you took back on c5, you wasted a move. So that's kind of the justification of this capture on c5. Here white plays knight to f3, we play b6, normal developing moves, bishop to f4, bishop b7, a rook to d1, knight c6, e3, knight h5. Very important idea, by the way. You want to go knight h5, you want to trade the knight for the bishop. After bishop to g3, we go bishop to e7. The idea of bishop to e7 is going to become very clear. The idea is that we want to take on g3, like you're seeing on the screen right now, and then we want to play h6. And what white will do here is white will play g4. Of course, we have to play h6 because this pawn is weak. We can play g6 as well, but that has problems in its own. We should play h6 here, and after pawn to g4, this bishop is very useful controlling this square. So g5 cannot be pushed because we would just take. That's the idea of bishop e7. Here we continue with rook c8, and we have a very normal position. White's going to try to attack on this side of the board with moves like a rook to h5, for example, re-enabling g5. We are going to, however, counter-attack on this side of the board, and basically we're not really scared of this move. We can always take on f3 and then take on g5, and we are going to have a good position. So you have to be slightly careful, but if you are, you're going to have a fine position. Okay, so there's one more variation that I want to discuss, and that's called the Noah variation. So let me just quickly go back. So in this position, instead of castles or c5 or knight to c6, we play this move d5. Now, the idea of d5 is very clear. We're striking in the center. This is the typical Queen's Gambit declined position. However, white played queen c2, which is not a useful move. Like, imagine we go back here, and let's say we try to go into this position, let's say knight to c3, knight f6, but for some reason in this position, white played this move queen c2. It doesn't make any sense, right? And then we played bishop b4. So this does not make a lot of sense. This queen c2 move does not make a lot of sense in this structure, in this opening. So we want to take advantage of that. I accidentally spoiled the next move. The move here for white that's correct is capturing on d5. And I think this is probably the best setup. White can try to play moves like knight to f3, but the ideas are going to be similar. You want to castle, and then you want to strike with c5. And what you're going to see in this game here, after takes, bishop to g5, h6, always an useful inclusion. White goes bishop to h4, and here we play a very, very strong idea. We play g5 and then we play c5. Now, what is our idea with these two moves? The idea is that we are going to take advantage of this pin right here by playing moves like knight to e4, queen a5, and everything is going to be attacking this knight. This became possible because white played bishop g5, and after h6 because white went back to h4. Once white goes back to h4, white cannot retreat over to this diagonal anymore to defend the knight. So we immediately just go after it, g5, c5. We play super aggressively here. And this is a lot of fun to play. And it's actually quite safe for black. It looks crazy to do this, but it's quite safe because you're the one attacking and white doesn't have any resources to counterattack you. Like, white cannot counterattack anywhere else, which is crazy, but your position is very strong. So in this position, the best move is to take on c5. However, we don't take back. We're not taking this pawn on c5. Remember, we're trying to attack here. We're trying to play as quickly as possible. So we play knight to e4. White plays e3, developing. Queen a5. Every move is designed to create a threat here. Rook to c1, and here on the screen you can see queen takes a2 is a possible move, or you can also play knight c6 and play for development. That is also totally fine. Like, for example, knight c6, if a3 or something like that is played, you can take, and then take one of these pawns, or not even take at all and just castle, which is also a way to play. So this is a super fun line. I would definitely recommend this line as well. I would either recommend the Noah variation or the Zurich variation. These are my preferred choices. However, if you like the other ones, you can play those as well. So another detail that I want to mention before I finish this episode is that after h6, white doesn't have to go to h4. White can actually take on f6. And there are a fair bit of games played in this continuation as well. There's actually 129 games at this moment. However, after bishop takes f6, of course we don't want to damage the structure. We take with the queen. And here, let's say a3. We can continue by playing for like speed and take on c3. We can also retreat in some of these lines, but here we should really take on c3, queen c3. And then we play this position, we play pawn to c6, getting this structure. In the next couple of moves, we want to play bishop to f5, knight d7, castle the king. And we are playing basically Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation. This is the Carlsbad structure, and it's already equal because we have traded two pieces off, and also we probably are going to get better development here. Basically, so I think this position is also very much playable for the black pieces. So this is going to be it for today's episode. Again, one final note, my recommendations are going to be to either play the Zurich variation with knight to c6, or this Noah variation with d5. These are my personal favorites. However, if you like the other ones, you can definitely play the other ones as well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.